Hey, folks, this is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. Super stoked to have you here. I can't wait to talk to my friend, Dr. Laura Pence. Before I introduce her more, please rate this podcast. I think there's about 1 trillion podcasts out there. Even Laura has a new one. So rate hers too. But if you rate our podcast, and I always say start at the right side. So you just click the 5th star, and I think it clicks all 5 stars. Just start there, and it helps other people like you find us. Because, it's a busy podcast world out there, and these ratings really help. So really appreciate that. Dr. Lara Pence, good friend of mine, and I really come to really enjoy our relationship. Gotten to see her over the years. She's the mind doctor, the chief mind doctor. What a cool title for Spartan, which,
Not bad.
both the company and all Spartan athletes need a lot of mind doctoring over the past year. They've been completely shut out of their sport. Clinical psychologist, been working for the last 15 years and more, working with elite athletes and professionals and people from all walks of life to really check in things that aren't serving them anymore, patterns that are holding them back, getting rid of those things, helping them see it, build new behaviors, new mental pathways, and to become more curious. And I love that. So the focus of our conversation today is really going to be about curiosity. And what does that mean? She got a podcast called Curious Minds. I was recently a guest. Thank you very much. We had a riveting conversation, really fascinating. So Dr. Laura Pence, and also she's going to be speaking at our Unbeatable Mind event coming up the 3rd week in March. And we're having a virtual event. So if you're interested in that, go check it out at unbeatablemindcom and be one of the folks who joins us and learns all about resilience. Laura, nice to see you. Thanks for joining me today.
Mark, it's so good to be here. I really do feel lucky and excited when you and I get to talk, not only because I think you and I have similar ideas and ways of thinking. So it's kind of
Right.
always nice to be validated, right? But there's
True.
also, I think, a really nice extension between the two of us where we take what we already know and work to elevate that understanding even
I
more
agree.
and go deeper. And so I appreciate that. It's always really special to me when I can find those people who not only want to do that, but are willing to do that in like real time,
Right. In
like
real
in
time.
front of
I
the
totally
microphone.
agree with you. It's a growth opportunity to get to
Yeah.
talk to you and not, some of my other podcast guests as well, because, I'm a little bit of an open book and, I like to be challenged and I have ideas around things, but then, I'm wrong at least 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So I get to
Exactly.
explore where I'm wrong and maybe learn and come out of these sessions a little bit stronger, a little bit more evolved. And that's what I'm hoping to bring to the listeners, right? Every
Hmm.
episode should be, you should listen to it and come out of it a different person
Hmm.
with some
Hmm.
greater awareness and insight about yourself or about the world, right? What I love about our relationship is you're a PhD clinical psychologist and I'm a Navy SEAL, you know, prac, I hate to use Tony Robbins' term, but practical psychologist, meaning,
Totally.
yeah, which sounds like proctologist, so we won't use that term. But I mean, I'm a self-taught dude when it comes to emotional development, but at the same time, I've learned a shit ton through years and years of therapy and deep dives and seeing the similarities, right, between, like how we were taught to think as Navy SEALs for positive psychology and
Yeah.
how I learned to think as a yogi in martial arts for kind of like spiritual and emotional psychology and then all the emotional work being married to a therapist and
Hmm.
doing tons of EMDR and gestalt therapy and visualization and and how all of those really are just different pathways to understanding who we are and our role in the world and how to behave, how to
Yeah.
show up.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that too because it's for me it was academic, didactic, educational learning first and then
Right.
experience later, right? Because you spend 5 years in a classroom learning about all these concepts, learning about all these ideas. And then you actually go do the work and you're like,
Right.
whoa,
Something's
this is
different here.
different. Yeah.
Well, that reminds me when I was in my doctorate for leadership and I'm learning all of these theories of leadership, but they seemed to me a little divorced from reality. And the teachers really had no leadership experience. And
Yes.
then I went to Iraq, like my mobilization to Iraq in 2004 interrupted my doctorate.
Hmm.
And while I was at war and watching like real leaders lead, I had that epiphany that like I'm never going to get what I'm looking for personally in that doctorate program.
That's right.
And I
That's
want to
right.
go teach leadership at a very visceral level. And that's when I quit the PhD program, the only thing I've ever quit in my life. I still feel guilty about that, oddly. So maybe I need some therapy. You can help me with that.
Well, it's funny because I was actually just thinking about this the other day when I was on one of my runs. And on my runs are inevitably where I kind of like go into some of my deepest thought. And I was thinking about when I had to defend my dissertation, and you
Right.
have a whole committee, right, that you're defending your dissertation to, and you select that committee. I mean, you go to them and you propose for them to be on your committee,
You
and
can
they,
stack the deck in your favor, I hope.
right, exactly. You definitely pick people you like and like you. But there were two gentlemen, actually, they were all men on my committee, which is interesting, in a field that's predominantly women. But one of them was in practice. He was the medical director of a treatment center, and the
Mhm.
other one was a faculty member. And I
Mhm.
remember that at one point they kind of got into it during my
Mhm.
defense of my dissertation, where the faculty member was sort of saying like, well, this is the modality you would use with this particular population. And the director of the facility was like, right, in
But
an ideal world, but we
right.
don't live there. And I was just thinking about the other day that like it's so true that we really have to have that art science blend of
Agree.
understanding, the tenets and the components and the data and the science, but then also to be able to really understand how that actually works in practicality,
Right.
and what that's actually like when you're with a person,
Right.
another
It's like the
human
difference
being.
between psychology and psychotherapy and therapy, like family
Yes,
therapy. They're very
exactly.
different.
Exactly.
Psychologist is going to, be able to prescribe you an antidepressant. A therapist is going to work with you on your emotional issues,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Have I got that
Mhm.
right? Now, you use the term active therapy or active therapist. And I like that because what I'm imagining is that you recognize, because let me back up a little bit. When I teach people in my program on Unbeatable Mind, I say, listen, you can't divorce the body and the mind and the emotions and the spirit. You ultimately are all one thing.
Mhm.
But because we're so compartmentalized in our Western world, we kind of look at them differently. We learn about them differently. And then we kind of separate ourselves into these different categories. And
Yep.
then we go forward as a separated self. And we wonder why we don't feel whole. So for me, active therapy is like bring the whole back together. You got to get active. Like I love the idea that you're working with athletes because athletes
Yep.
understand their body and they've got the beginnings of mental toughness, but usually it's the emotional piece. And then you understand, hey, let's work with your emotions through your body,
That's right.
and through the mind. Let's do it all together. Am I
That's right.
on
Yeah.
track with that? Sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I use the term active therapist, there's actually, I kind of think about it in different ways, right? It's a little bit of a play on the word itself. Like I'm very active in session with the
Mm-hmm.
people that I work with.
You
I
mean
am
you're
not
doing burpees while you're there?
not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
Um, but
That's
I'm
advanced. That's advanced
right,
therapy.
right. That's the advanced track here. I'm active in the sense that, typically what we imagine therapists to be, or we often get from TV or movie, where it's sort of the therapist lounging back in the chair every once in a while, kind of saying, "Yeah, tell me how that feels." And that's just
Hmm.
not me. I mean, probably you would guess that anyway from the energy that I bring to any
No,
situation. I can't
I don't
temper
think that
that.
type of therapy is very effective, personally. Right?
I would
Traditional
agree with
talk
you.
therapy, just people tend to just run the same loops over and over and over. And if there's no intervention, then these people get stuck and they actually grease the groove of the patterns, in my opinion. I
That's
could be wrong, but
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think very early on in my career, when I went into private practice, you know, I got all the things, right? Like I had all the nice office with the great couch and like the this, and I played therapist. Like
hmm
I really showed up in a way that um, that was attempting to be a character rather than being really who I was. And I quickly learned, very quickly, that did not work for me. Not only was I not happy like doing that, but it didn't work for my clients either. It didn't feel like there was this real connection. So I made autobills real quick and
hmm
shifted the way that I did things. And to be an active therapist to me means to really show up in the room. And listen,
hmm
if I'm going to ask my clients to get uncomfortable and to do the work, I'm going to do the work with them in that
right.
room with them. So when I ask them, for example, to get curious, I'm getting curious right alongside them.
hmm
When I'm asking them to get uncomfortable, I too am getting uncomfortable by asking them questions that maybe moved me out of my comfort zone. Um, and then, yes, there's this other piece, which is integration, which is me knowing the importance of mind body being integrated and asking regularly and attempting to really shine a spotlight on the importance of movement and being
Right.
active and
hmm
understanding the body. Um, and then the third one is I actually am an active therapist. I like to be active, sort of like the easy one, right?
Have you
Um,
back when? Do you remember the world when we could actually be face to face with people? You know, it was a couple of years ago,
Hardly.
or
Yeah,
barely. Yeah. When you back in that world, did you ever do like one-on-one therapy out like in the
yes,
wilderness or taking a run or because I think that's such a cool idea or on an
totally.
obstacle course, you know.
Yeah, so there were definitely a few times with various clients where we would go outside of the office that I was in. There was a pond. We would go outside. We would walk through the grass, sometimes
hmm
sit in the grass to try and
hmm
really sort of like connect with a new idea rather than a therapy chair or a couch, that kind of thing.
hmm
Um, there was one adolescent once that I worked with who loved basketball and I loved basketball. So we went out and played basketball together
Oh,
and
cool.
kind of did
That's
like
fun.
a little therapy on the good old court.
Right.
So I've been maybe unconventional in some of my ways of doing that. And I'm sure there are probably some mental health professionals that are listening that like shiver at that idea. Like the idea of doing that with a client just feels so uncomfortable and so not what we're supposed to do and where the
hmm
boundaries are. But I think if you're real clear with your clients and kind of what you're working towards together, why does the office have to be where healing
Right.
happens?
Well, there's such a growing field in somatic movement, somatic therapy.
Yes.
And have you experienced, I have myself, so I'll just frame it this way. I've experienced where we get people moving, whether it's one of our kind of unbeatable mind experiences where we take them to the beach and get wet and sandy or put them in an ice bath or, you know, and people are facing fears.
Mhm.
And it's that fear that triggers the unconscious discomfort and unproductive behavior patterns that they're
Mhm.
in therapy for.
Right.
And once they face that fear down and they suddenly realize, hey, this is fun, I can do this, then all of a sudden there's this huge release that that which was holding them back has been identified, exposed, objectified, and then conquered
Mm.
through the movement.
Yep. Mhm.
You
Mhm.
had that experience too. And this is why I don't think you can divorce the body and the mind from emotional development.
No, you
Obviously, not
absolutely
the
can.
mind, but I mean, certainly the body. Yeah.
Yeah, in my experience, this is really where as a psychologist in this field, I think it's so essential that I highlight the limitations of talk therapy. You
Right.
know, there have been so many instances where individuals have come into my office and they can't and not only can they not access sort of their deep self-limiting beliefs or their own judgments, they can't even access the words to articulate that. And so for me to sit with them for 50 minutes and try to get them to say how they feel, they do not have a word for it. I mean, it's not that they don't know or they're trying to hide it or they're avoiding it. They don't have a word. And so oftentimes at that point I refer out to some type of movement Let's get
Yeah.
you into yoga. If you're a dancer, let's get you into some dance movement. Let's get you, let's get you on the treadmill or out on the trails running. And then let's get you back in and see what happens. And it is profound and incredibly insightful for me to see when they do that and then they come back. There's been unlocking.
Right.
There has been sort of a release of that which has been pent up, and now certain things are much more accessible to them,
Right.
both in memory but also in words. And I
Yeah.
think I think we need to do more of that as a field. I think we need to not only understand our limitations, but understand how the integration of various modalities can be so helpful for the individual.
I could agree more. It's interesting. I was just kind of laughing internally when you're talking about not having the words. I think most men, I'm thinking any male listening to this podcast is like, yeah, I don't have words for it. Like men have words like I'm pissed off,
Right.
I'm horny, right? Or right, I'm hungry. Like,
Totally.
how do you feel? Pissed off, horny, hungry, or
Right.
jealous, right? Those are
Right.
about four big ones. There might be a couple more, but we're pretty much narrow in those categories. And that's so limiting, right? It really is
Yes.
limiting, right? Because there's this vast world. When I have done emotional work, and the therapist hands me this list, says, okay, here's a chart of emotions, and there's like 500 words on there. I'm like,
Right.
I don't know what that one means. You know what I mean? Help me out here.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and we can get away with that. I mean, that's the other thing too, is like we give ourselves and others permission to not expand their emotional vocabulary. We ask our friends, "Hey, how are you today?" And they say, "Fine." And somehow that's okay. Fine tells me literally nothing. Like
Nothing.
fine
We
tells
say
me
fine means fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and like
yes, I've
emotionally
heard that.
vacant or something.
I've heard that. Exactly.
Or
So
feelings internally not expressed. That's
that
another
one
one.
too, right? So, I think we give ourselves permission, we give others permission to not expand their emotional vocabulary. And I think we need to do much more of asking the follow-up. I'm fine. Tell me what that looks like. Tell me what that means, like, or I don't know what that means. Say more.
Right.
When we pick our kids up from school, how was your day? Good. Right? That's 99% of the time the answer. Tell me what that
Mm-hmm.
means. Tell me what that looks like. Who did you help today? Who helped you? What were you proud of
Oh,
today?
that's
What
cool.
scared
Right.
you? That kind of thing. So I think and this goes back to curiosity. We have to be asking better questions.
Right. Another thing I wanted to get your 2 cents on is an experience that I've had with my EMDR therapist. She's always saying, okay, so where would you locate that feeling in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, nowhere. Like, I don't experience that in my body, but I do experience it outside of my body, or as
Mm,
a
interesting.
as a sense of kind of beingness, or like when you say how do I feel it out here in front of my heart, or I feel it up here kind of
Mm-hmm.
around my head, or what I mean, down here. It's not in my belly, but it's I don't know what the hell that means, right? Maybe because I've done so much physical training and somatic work, I've kind of like flushed out all the stuck feelings from my physical body, and I'm now feeling them in kind of my etheric body. I don't know.
Maybe I'll
Interesting.
propose. I'll
Or
propose.
I've stuffed all those feelings.
No, I'm proposing some real time therapy here, Mark.
Okay, true.
To
This is why I
me,
want to do the podcast. So I wanted to get some therapy in.
to me it feels like actually that's a really healthy perspective, because when I ask my clients, tell me where you feel that in your body, part of what I'm trying to get at is how attached they are to that emotion, that it
Mm-hmm.
has become an element of their existence, of
Right,
their
right.
body, of their physical being. And so from my perspective, when I'm hearing you say that, I'm hearing really this healthy detachment from knowing that a feeling isn't you. A
Right,
feeling is an experience that you
right.
step into, that you don't embody that feeling, you experience that feeling.
Right, right. Yeah, it comes to you through you. It can be experienced as a. It doesn't have to have a. And this is why the word feeling is probably not a good word going forward, because people associate a feeling with like, oh, there's pain over here, or
Yes.
or and there's no question that I can feel sadness in my heart, right? Or the aching of loss in my heart.
Hmm.
So I get that. But if someone says, when you think back about that guy who screwed you 15 years ago, where do you find that, where do you feel that in your body? I'm like, that one's not in my body
Yeah, yeah. I
at all.
understand that. Well, and I think it's a testament to, I mean, A, it's a testament to the work you've done, but B, it's a testament when we're asking that of people, um, of how I think how addicted people can be to certain feelings and sensations, and really having a difficult time letting those go. I think, for example, we can be addicted to shame.
Hmm.
I think we can be addicted to anger and the rush that we feel
People
when we step
identify
into
that like
rage. Yep,
I am shame. I'm supposed to feel shame because I'm a bad person.
that's right.
I'm
That's
supposed
right.
to be anger because my dad was angry. It's just who I am, right?
That's exactly
Those
right.
are
Yep,
stories that need to be unpacked because those negative feelings and emotions can do nothing but hold you back, right?
absolutely. Hmm.
When you work with Spartan athletes, you clearly most of them come to you and say, Lara, I want to win.
That's right.
Right, I want to win, and so I need some mental toughness, right? What can you do for me? And so you say, oh yeah, I can get your mind in order. I can get you a fit mind, but most of it is emotional, right? I mean, winning is an emotional thing,
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
my opinion.
Well, and
Clearly, you got to have goals and discipline and kind of that mental toughness to stick with it. But ultimately, the difference between who wins and who doesn't is emotional.
right, and it's a mental strength and a mindset,
Hmm.
that can carry you through the finish line. And oftentimes, when I work with athletes, they think strength and they imagine rigidity, and I think strength and I imagine flexibility. So
Totally
to
agree.
me, to
Yeah.
be mentally strong is to be mentally flexible. Um and I think, so for me, a lot of the work with the athletes that I have on my caseload at any given time is really about breaking down some of the rigid beliefs they have about themselves, rigid belief about competition,
Hmm.
attachments to winning and losing, values. Why are they doing this in the first place? Why does this even
Hmm.
matter to them?
Hmm.
What about it matters to them?
Hmm.
Um, all of those things. And then also in there's quite a bit of identity work. How much of this is really about your attachment to being seen, for example, as the
Right.
Olympian versus
Right.
actually wanting the process of what it means to unleash your greatness.
Totally agree. And I think I've done a ton of podcasts with people who are like trying to do something crazy. And I try to get to the bottom, like, why do you want to climb Everest and seven peaks in one, seven highest peaks in 1 year?
Right.
Right. And I had a Navy SEAL friend who climbed, and he literally got pulmonary edema and almost died. And I'm like, well, why did you want to climb Everest? And so we
Right.
finally got into that. He had a very abusive childhood, and he's always been trying to prove himself through his
Mm.
whole life.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, like being a Navy SEAL and a best-selling author wasn't enough for him still.
Right.
And I had
Right.
to look at that in my own life. I'm like, geez, am I playing at that a little bit? Nah. And I'm like, well, maybe I don't need to go get that PhD after all. I got enough accomplishments, right? already,
Right.
I've already played the overachiever card. Let me find another path, that just is okay with who I am right now.
Right. Well, but I think that's where the curiosity piece comes in. That's where asking yourself the better question
Right.
is helps to unload a better answer.
I
And
love that.
I really try and move away from the why of things and the how or what of things. Instead of why am I doing this, how is doing this serving me? What
Hmm.
about this matters to me? Why
Hmm.
moves us into such a defensive position? And so when we can ask better questions and really dive into um, a much deeper exploration and discovery of whatever it is that we're thinking, feeling, doing, relating, behaving to at any given time, gosh, man, we just become much more flexible in our thinking and in our
Hmm.
ability to tolerate different perspectives. And it
Hmm.
really helps our mind.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to talk about resiliency at the Unbeatable Mind experience. But this idea of flexibility and resiliency are so closely related, right? Because,
Totally.
we used to say to SEAL fit athletes, would you rather be the mighty oak or the reed when the tsunami comes, right?
Mm,
I'd rather be the reed who can just roll and lay down and let the tsunami wash over. And then I pop back up and just keep on my day.
I love that. Yep.
Whereas the oak gets swept away. And most
Right.
people, like you said, from a mental toughness standpoint, they try to be the oak. They
Yep.
have to be the firmament that's hold everything up. And like they feel like Sisyphus, they're pushing the rock uphill every day, and then boom, they slip and it rolls down and it pummels them.
That's right.
And eventually they just say, screw it.
Mm.
Whereas resiliency, man, you got to be like the reed. You just got to expect that you're going to get pummeled, and you approach it with a smile, like, come on, come at me.
Exactly.
Fall down
Yeah.
7 times, get up again, dust off, and go at it an eighth time. That's cool. Now, how does this link to curiosity? It seems like flexibility and curiosity are have a strong tie. Let's get into that.
Yeah, so I think, there are 3 words that I love to sort of toy around. Well, maybe 4 actually. Watch me list 5 or 7
Okay.
or 8. But
It's a
so
free world. Go for it.
curiosity really is a big one for
It
me.
used to be a free world, by the way. Sorry, just had to
Right,
throw that
not
in there.
anymore. So curiosity is huge. And in curiosity, I think is open-mindedness, right? And so I think I had an interesting podcast actually with someone who really highlighted this for me. And I hadn't really thought about it this way, and he helped me articulate it. But it's almost like open-mindedness allows us to be curious. So I think those are 2 words that I think are really important. The other is discovery. I think
Mm-hmm.
discovery is a really important word because when we're getting curious, it's yes, just that act in and of itself actually like helps you move into the part of your brain that's better at learning and, helps you perhaps take on the idea of a different perspective. But discovery then really becomes sort of about like, and then how do you use this curiosity, right? So how do you
Mm-hmm.
use what you're getting curious about and then try and toy with it and learn? um from my perspective, I mean, look, curiosity is rooted in our evolution. It's rooted in our biology. In order to adapt, we had to become curious. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how could I make fire right now? What do I need right now to ensure that the tribe survives? We had to get curious about that. And I think we are losing our desire to be curious because we want to be right and we want to know and have expertise.
Right.
And so that is sort of being held up as like this trophy. And I
Right.
think
And so
we
that's really about risk, right? Like curiosity
yes,
kills the cat. So let's not go kill ourselves by getting overly curious. Let's stay in our lane and prove that we're the
exactly.
expert, right?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly,
Which then
exactly.
gets us stuck and ends up killing us eventually. So it's counterintuitive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, from my perspective, like this really my own desire for more curiosity came from me witnessing in the therapy space with my clients how much more effective curiosity was than any other modality, than any, you're taught all these things, and this goes back
Instead
to
of using some deeply
yes.
therapeutic term, you just talk about curiosity and it
That's
leads to new
exactly right.
ways. That's
That's
cool.
exactly right. In
Very
the
cool.
beginning of my work, I would often with clients try and pull out all these psychological construction, like,
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
this jargon. But it was really when I just started saying, I don't know why you feel that way. Let's get curious
Mm-hmm.
about it, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure why you have these feelings towards mom.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? How
Yeah.
can you get curious?
Can we talk a little bit about how to like? Is there an art to asking better questions? Let me
Mm,
frame this up a little bit. I'm always looking at like what's next for me in terms of like my mental training. My personal mental development. And
sure.
an email from MIT came across, and it was a certificate program or even a master's degree, and it was all about inquiry,
Hmm.
asking questions for leaders. It was a leadership program, so it must have been like a certification. And I was really intrigued with it. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
push the buy button because I didn't have the time to commit to it yet, but I was curious about that. And so I wonder, because curiosity really is about asking better questions. And I've used the term before that the quality of our life is going to be based upon the quality of the questions we ask. So
Yeah.
what's a good, in your opinion, kind of way of learning how to ask better questions of ourselves if we don't have a therapist like
Yeah.
you kind of working with us.
Yeah. So I'll go back to what I said earlier and say it again because I can't quite say it enough. I'm
Right.
learning. Why should be taken off the table, I believe. And I think it should be
Interesting.
replaced with how or what. And I think part of this goes back to,
Let's go into that a little bit more.
yeah,
Because this kind of like flies right in the face of something I've been telling people, like you got to know your why. And if
yes,
you don't know your why, then you're gonna get confused when things get challenging. So
yes.
help me
So
understand why we take why away, because I might have to change my whole training program, go back to the start.
I love
Thank
that
you
you
very
said
much.
that. Um, uh, well, so here's part of why I now it's going to pop up everywhere in our
That's right. You can't
conversation.
use the term why anymore in this podcast. So I'm going to call you out. You owe me
um,
50 burpees every
I
time you
know
say that word.
exactly. So I believe that when we're kids, why is often used to highlight and observe something that we've done wrong.
There's 50
You know,
burpees.
if we spill the milk, if we didn't do the homework, if we, made a mess with our snow boots in, the walkway, why did you do that? Why? And so I think in some ways our brain is wired to identify why as connecting with something that we didn't do right. Um,
Interesting.
and you could think about it, like even think like if you were to close your eyes and do sort of a meditation on this or a mindful exercise, and imagine you're in a classroom, right? And you've raised your hand and you've answered a question. And the professor says, "Why did you answer it that way?" Do you
Hmm.
immediately think you got the question right? Or do you immediately think you got the question
No, I
wrong?
totally screwed up. Right.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
So I think it's like immediately our brain goes to uh-oh, there's something wrong here. So I think and listen, I think we can rewire that. And I actually think this is
Right.
where you don't have to rewrite your whole program because the way that you talk about why is your true
Your
north.
purpose, your true north, your
Exactly.
purpose, right? But it make me think about the use of that word, though.
Yeah. So I think when we are getting curious with ourselves and with other people, um, how and what allow you to go deeper, allow you to ask more questions. So for example, one of the exercises that I do with my clients is we'll start at the real surface level, right? So they'll say some if for example I'm working with somebody who has an eating disorder because I have a specialty in eating disorders and they say, well, I don't want to eat the cupcake.
Hmm.
Okay. And then I'll keep chipping away by asking questions. What is it about the cupcake that you don't like? I don't like that
Hmm.
it had frosting. Frosting has a lot of fat. Okay. What
Hmm.
is it about fat that you don't like? It's gross and ugly.
Hmm.
What is it about gross and ugly that you don't like? Nobody loves a gross and ugly person. What is it about not being loved that you're worried about? If I'm not
Hmm.
loved, I'll be forgotten. There it is. There
Right.
it is. You're worried you're going to be
How
forgotten.
many? I've heard that 7 questions is needed to get, at
Ooh.
least to get to the root of things.
I love that. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
can't remember where I heard that, and I wrote it in the first version of Unveil Mind. This questioning process to try to, uncover what you just went through is basically the seven layer questioning process.
Right.
I'm sure there's
Exactly.
someone out there, and if we've stolen it from you, I really apologize because I never meant to do that. Someone's got a trademark.
We're giving you credit. We just
Right,
don't
we're going
know
to give
your
you credit. We
name.
just don't know who you are. So that's fascinating. But we're not conditioned to ask questions of ourselves like that, right? That's why it's so effective as a coaching process, right? Like what
Mhm.
you just kind of modeled. But
Mhm.
how important it is, like I'm developing a journal for Unbeatable Mind,
Mm.
and it's got a lot of questions every day to ask yourself,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? What
Yeah.
went well? Why? What can I do better? What did I learn from it? I mean, they're not. I'm not going 7 layers deep, but maybe I will.
Yeah, but I think that's essential because
We need some cues to help it do it. Help
right,
us
and
do
we
it.
get so caught up in, what others identify as like the grind of life, do
Hmm.
we just wake up and we go? We don't wake
Right.
up and be, we
Hmm.
wake up and do. So I think also I just think the act of asking yourself a question or asking, somebody you're in a relationship with a question. Like, slow stuff down.
Yeah, I love that.
You pause a little bit rather than just continuing to operate.
So many of our clients, and we're Unbeatable Mind is not a psychology or therapy program, but it ends up being a big part of it,
Yeah.
because again, we end up where we are because of the behaviors we take. We have the behaviors we, act upon and take because of some sort of emotional pattern that we developed often, or thought slash emotional pattern. So it all ends up coming back to that. And what I'm finding is that a lot of our clients are really facing existential questions about who they are,
Mm,
what they're doing on this planet, what their next thing is for their life, and so they're in some sort of transition. They're always in transition. Even if
mm-hmm,
they're in a place that's really successful, they're like starting to think, is this relevant? How do I be
mm-hmm,
more relevant? So it always comes back to that point of, knowing how to be before you just do the next thing,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to point out, which I think is really interesting to me, because you just opened my mind on this, is we talk about finding your purpose, your why, but we talk about in the context of the three P's. The other two, so one P is purpose, the other P is what are your principles, and the other P is what are you passionate about. So the purpose is why,
Mm-hmm.
the principles are like the what,
Mm-hmm.
and the passion is the how,
The
right? So
how.
it's right, exactly. It's like you, or it could be, you could say the how is kind of how you want to live, and those are your principles, and the what is like what do you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's your passion, and the
Mm-hmm.
purpose is why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess where I'm going with this is a lot of our clients are clueless about the why.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
just get this blank stare. So we have some practices to help them, future me, visualization, writing your obituary. Some of them are pretty common, some of them are really unique to us. But what I found most useful is to have them answer the other two questions first.
Sure.
The
Mm-hmm.
what and the how. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you believe in, and how do you like to operate in this world? And then that starts to really point toward some sort of overarching, like archetypal purpose.
Yeah.
They can
Yeah.
lock around. They're like, oh yeah, that's it. My purpose is to be, the best father I could be. It could be that simple, right?
Right. Right. Well, I
Or
think
it
you
could
make a
be
good
to
point.
change the world, from, and so we can heal the environment, change, heal the oceans, or it could be something really earth shattering like that.
Yeah, I think too, the other thing that I think about when I consider purpose is strengths, which is a
Hmm.
word that I always have a hard time saying because it's a mouthful. But, you know, the strengths that exist within you that truly are extraordinary and unique to you,
Hmm.
um, from my perspective, really help like unleash that purpose, unleash that contribution.
Right.
And I think sometimes we forget that piece. We
Right.
forget that strength that exists within us.
Yeah.
And
Instead
that
of
could be,
like really, really covering down on that unique thing that you just do better than anyone else,
that's right.
people are taught that they've got to get good at all this other stuff, and
Yes.
oftentimes they ignore their biggest strength.
Exactly. And there's actually been more research to date in organizational psychology and in like leadership training that companies that once there was sort of this idea that like, okay, we identify the employee's strength and weakness, and then we try and balance it out, right? Like we
Hmm.
identify what they're not very good at and their limitations, and we really try and raise them up.
Hmm.
But now companies are realizing that like that the energy expenditure in that, the return on investment is actually not very good. It's a lot better to dial in on the strengths and
Hmm.
make those even stronger,
Hmm.
through things like curiosity, shifting
Hmm.
perspective, flexibility, distress tolerance, all of those things that like highlight the strength, and just let the limitation be. It's okay for us to have things that we're not very good at. Like that's totally fine.
Hmm.
We don't always have to evolve and work ourselves into such a better position where our limitations are now no longer. Like to be human is to have a limitation. That's okay.
Right. Speaking of limitations, what are the biggest obstacles you see to someone really becoming very curious?
Mm.
As a path to growth. Becoming curious about what's working in their life, what's not working, to ask better questions. To get out of the box and open up their mind. What are the biggest obstacles?
Yeah, so two big things I see. One is that they really actually don't even know what that looks like because they don't have a role model or a peer in their life that does it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was lucky enough to grow up with two parents who were in the arts. And so we grew up with movies, and movies was literally like in my DNA. When I say we grew up with movies, like every night, poster board on the wall of what we were going to see kind of movies,
That's
35
cool.
millimeters. Um,
That's
and
neat.
yeah, and so the curiosity of story was always there, right? And afterwards, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I was brought up in a world where we ask questions. So for me, it's very natural to step into this. But there are definitely individuals in their own life. And I remember even you talking about this on your podcast or on my podcast when you were on it, you know, that that like there was a set path for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for many people, I think there is a set path. I don't think they have individuals in their life who are curious. And I think podcasts like this have really been successful because people crave it and they don't necessarily know how to get curious. So one of the barriers is that they don't have a role model or peer, but guess what? Now they can listen on podcasts, they can start
Mm-hmm.
to listen to interesting ideas and
Mm-hmm.
people and start to get curious themselves. So that's one barrier I see, but there's a pretty easy workaround for that.
Mm-hmm.
The other barrier that I see is fear. You know, what if I get curious and I uncover something I don't like? What if I get curious about whether or not I really actually enjoy my career and realize I've spent the last 40 years as a doctor and I hate being a doctor? You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think people are afraid of what they might uncover and what they might find. What if as a parent I get curious about, you know, whether or not I wanted to be a parent in the first place? And I think to
Hmm.
myself, gosh, I don't know if I really did. And oh my gosh, I have two kids, you know? So like
Ruh-roh.
that's yeah, row. So I think that there's fear in stepping into curiosity because curiosity is in so many ways defined by that which we don't know and that which is uncertain. And so that can be scary for people.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So facing fear
Hmm.
and uncovering, that which is, that thing that's going to be scary is what's holding you back.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so the fear is basically of what you will become if you were to face that and
Hmm.
overcome it, right?
Hmm.
Because there's the unknown. So ultimately, we're talking about uncertainty.
Hmm.
So curiosity confronts uncertainty head on
Hmm.
in a playful way,
I love that.
right? As
Hmm.
opposed to like overcoming your fears, right? Go
Right.
forth on your hero's journey. You're like, wait, that sounds painful. As opposed to your approach is like, let's get curious, right? And then
Yeah.
as you ask better questions, you're going to have to confront things that are uncomfortable. And then, like we say, you'll get comfortable with that discomfort as you inch your way forward, and you'll discover that that which you feared was really nothing. It was a phantom, right?
Right.
Or a
Right.
shadow, right? And I love that term shadow from the
Yep.
emotional, right? Shadow can't hurt you, right?
Right. Right.
It's
Exactly.
ephemeral, right? It's not real.
It's not real. Exactly. Exactly. So
Mm.
you know, and I think when I sit with individuals who are I hate to use the word resistant because to me resistance and somebody else said this, I can't claim it for myself, but resistance really is fear of vulnerability. So when a client shows up and they are resistant to getting curious, um I think there's even a there. I think it's, you know, what is it about looking at this a different way, about asking yourself, you know, more thoughtful questions that feels really scary to you right now? Can we even get curious about that? You know,
Hmm.
like for anybody that's listening right now, I would encourage you, for example, if you have a friend that you name as a friend, but that you haven't reached out to recently. How come?
Right.
Right? Like, how can you get curious about that and not with your judgmental ego and your critical ego, but with your curious one
Mm-hmm.
that's gentle and introspective and interested in inquiry, but not going to criticize you for your response.
I love that. I was thinking about some of the most evolved people that I've been around or had, as trainers, like Mr. Nakamura, my first mentor.
Mm-hmm.
They're very playful
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Right.
deadly serious when they need to be. But,
Yeah.
that's not their go-to. Their go-to is like a lightness and a playfulness.
Yep.
And that sounds a lot to me like curiosity, spontaneity. And so you can almost say that evolution or growth, in my opinion, will lead toward that naturally, but you can stimulate it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
through asking better questions and through a deliberative process of facing those fears and getting curious about them.
I think so. And I love
Ultimately,
that you use that word playful, because I do think, for example, clients might tell me something that happened and I'm like, how's that working for you? Like, that doesn't sound.
right?
And I'll kind of laugh and they'll end up laughing with me, but then I'll be like, no, but really, how is that working for you? Because here we are again. So I do think playful is a part of it that just naturally again takes us away from that hypercritical ego, which can
Right.
really be
Yeah.
hurtful.
Yeah. Vicious.
Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah. There's so much great stuff that we've talked about. And, I think that's like the holy grail of development, right? Is to let go of
Mhm.
these things that we just grasp onto, and then we get hardened and rigid and closed and wrapped around the axle, around whatever it is, a belief about ourselves or
Yeah.
a belief about who our family is or who our
Yep.
tribe or our country is. Or how we're supposed to be as a leader, always right.
Yes.
That's righteousness. Or, someone's super judgmental, right? That's judgmentalism. All these things, these isms just like close down. They're all ego. The
Mhm.
more you can let go and surrender and do it in that, like you said, that kind of gracious way where you're not hard on yourself, because the ego will try to take it back.
It
Even
will.
if you try to be like all spiritual and forgiving, the ego will quickly co-opt that,
Yep.
right? And judge others as less than yourself, right? That's like a
Absolutely.
spiritual bypass. And that I see that rampant. But letting go of all the need to be anything but just who you are, right? At
Mhm.
your core essential source self.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's
And
essential.
curiosity is a great way to let go, because you can ask those questions and be like, oh yeah, maybe I can think of this differently and let go of that old thing for a while and see how it works. Like you said, ask the question, how's that working for you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and one of the things that I will often say to my clients is, listen, it doesn't have to be any which way. Let's just be curious. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not using this as a conduit to convince you otherwise.
Mhm.
I'm using this as an opportunity for us to explore. That's it.
Love that.
That's all it is.
Well, I'm curious, Lara, how many burpees you owe me?
I don't know.
I think it's a few hundred because you use that term a lot.
Probably.
So
Probably.
you better get busy.
I'll get on that,
You
Mark. I'll
better
get
get
on
on
it.
that.
Uh-huh.
Thanks so much for joining me today, man. This has been a great conversation, really valuable. So you're going to be speaking at our Unveil Mind Summit or Experience. That's what, March 14th to 17th, I think, right?
Yeah, one of those
What
days.
you
I've got
don't
it on my
We don't have
calendar.
a schedule yet for which day for you yet. So, but just sometime during that. So if you're listening and you want to hear more from Dr. Laura and also others like Jason Redman and my Navy SEAL mentor, Mark Crampton, and myself and others from my team, then check that out at unveilmind.com. But Laura, your stuff, where is your, like, where are you on
In the
the
internet
internet
ethos.
sphere, right?
Yeah. So you can head to my website, drlarapence.com, and my name is Lara. Everybody does you. It's
Yeah.
not, there's just no you.
No
It's just
you,
not
and
there.
there's no you in Laura. Lara.
No, no. It's all I. So, and then Instagram at Dr. Lara Pence. You can find me there as well. And then my podcast, Curious Minds with Dr. L, is, the usual places where you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts,
Awesome.
Spotify, all those places.
You told me about this cool little product you're developed. That's like a set of like question
Yes.
cards that help you ask better questions. So that's a great place for people to start. What's that called?
Yeah, it is. So it's called Lifebox, LIGHFBOX. The idea being that when you shine a light on your life, it gets brighter, and everything is in this beautiful white box. So there's
Oh, cool.
180 cards with questions and prompts that work to exercise your mind and spark curiosity and really boost your mental fitness through flexibility. So it's basically a compilation of like all the questions that I have asked my clients through the years that I've done this work, and some of the questions that I have found to be most effective in getting my clients to be more curious. So they can go to lifebox.com, and we're also on Instagram, and get yourself a box.
That
It's a
sounds
pretty,
cool. That sounds like
yeah.
something that'd be fun-ish, maybe to do with a partner. Ask them the question.
Yes, actually, we've gotten some amazing reviews from individuals that have got our products. And one of my favorite is that this one couple says that they now substitute a Lifebox card every night for the glass of wine that they used to have. And they no longer have wine. And now they have a Lifebox card, which I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm a substitute for wine, I have
Oh,
clearly made my mark.
can I do wine and Lifebox
I
together?
knew you were going to ask that. And yes, you
Okay.
can, Mark.
Thank you. Good. Appreciate it. Dr. Lara said I could. All right. Thanks so much for being here, Lara. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And
Thank you, Mark.
appreciate all you're doing and the work that you're doing in the world. It's important.
I appreciate you.
Hoo-yah. All right, folks. Check out Dr. Lara at all the normal places, and they'll be in the show notes of this podcast. And check out the Lifebox. That sounds like a really cool product. I'm going to go get one, and I am going to use it over a glass of wine with my wife. So I'll report back and write your review. Make sure people know that that's totally okay. Thanks for your support of the Unveiled Mind podcast, folks. Stay focused and be curious. Hoo-yah, Divine out.